We have very different opinions on the Missouri Tigers this season. But before we get started and before David throws a bunch of numbers at you to hype you up about how under the radar this Missouri team is, let's hold David accountable for all the things that he said about Missouri this time last year.
Do we have to?
You're the one that wrote the intro.
For the ceiling, yeah, I'm like you, Maddie. Yeah, this team could go. 21 games is what I've written down for like a ceiling, maybe 22. We'll see how they and then pick up a few more in the SEC tournament. Talking 6 or 7 seed for the NCAA tournament is what I'm vibing with. But as far as my expectation go, and I really want to highlight this because like we talked about it a lot last season, Dennis Gates and Todd Golden were the two best hires 2 years ago when the mass coaching change happened in the SEC. Hi, Apollo. I see you there. But like, yeah, it's Dennis Gates is one of those coaches I've got circled in my not quite absolute trust category yet, but I've got him in my I'm really holding on to. I'm thinking you're going to make the tournament regardless of what this roster may say and under any other note. I was wrong.
It's Missouri season preview today on the Hoop Southbound Show.
Everybody gets things wrong. You picked A&M to win the SEC last year. Everyone and their mother was wrong about Arkansas last season, and sometimes we get things right. I had Tennessee picked as SEC champs last year, and our big board practically picked the national championship game. I still hold Dennis Gates is a good basketball coach. We'll see how the season goes.
All right, let's rip the Band-Aid off and talk about Missouri last year. Missouri fans, if you want to skip ahead, I really, really don't blame you. In a simple phrase, let's call it a disaster.
But not really as bad as it was kind of made out to be, honestly. Pretty much everyone, including us, as wrong as I was, saw a step back year for Missouri last season. Things just went worse than expected for the Tigers.
They really, really did. Tigers went 8-24 last year. They finished last in the SEC and failed to win a single conference game. It was their worst season since 2016, their worst record since 2016, and their worst finish in KenPom since 2016.
Yeah, believe it or not, Missouri was not the worst team in the SEC in KenPom. Vanderbilt was the worst at 183. Missouri may have not won a game, but the computer, despite that thought did think that Vandy was worse. Missouri at least finished around teams that came from multiple bid leagues, like the Mountain West, the American, and the Big 12. As bad as things were, this team never really quit, and the computer kind of reflects that because they were playing hard and they were playing some decent basketball at times. They played hard, and like I said, KenPom and other systems all reflect exactly who Missouri actually was, despite no wins.
Yeah, and Gates kept saying that whether coach speak or not, he was always like, this team is close to getting a win, or we just ran out of gas, or we just got to clean up the turnovers, so on and so forth. Wins just never came. First time they finished without a win in conference play, like you said, in over 110 years.
And I wanna point out how much they retained this offseason. A lot of the guys who left for the portal were guys who were limited. I think that tells me that the core still believes in what they're doing there, and I think that should be something telling about how the players on this team at least feel about this team.
Definitely. So let's go to the storylines for this season. Maybe forget a little bit of what happened in the past
I'm sure
because
Missouri fans would appreciate that.
because so much of what happened over the last year surrounds the storylines for this season.
It really does. Missouri fans have been looking forward to this season for a while because over the last two off seasons, Gates has killed it in recruiting, bringing in one of the best freshman classes in the SEC and the country, and then followed it up getting experienced and talented players out of the portal. They pulled in one of the best transfer classes in the SEC as well. Big boost. And I think that brings hope for this team. And doing a complete 180 from last season is just how bad it was to how good things can be this year. Now, as bad as everything was, obviously there's some unhappy groups of people in the fan base. It's kind of gross to talk about, the hot seat this early in the season. But USA Today College Basketball Wire listed Dennis Gates having the hottest seat in the SEC. I won't go as far to say that he is necessarily on the hot seat yet, but boy, is there pressure. When you have a team this talented, if you don't perform, it's a pretty good hint of what the problem is. And it's normally not the players in that situation. I think we're going to get some answers this year exactly on the Dennis Gates situation there in Missouri. Then with all this talent and the combination of how bad it was last year, it might be weird, but some are, Missouri's getting picked pretty low in the SEC. Are they getting overlooked? I personally think so, but a lot of people feel like they're betting against Dennis Gates and not necessarily the talent on this team.
All right, let's end the bad stuff and get to the players that these Mizzou fans need to know for this upcoming season.
Key piece returning for the Tigers is Tamar Bates. Put up 13.5 points per game, 3 rebounds a night. Big boost for a team that likes to shoot from deep. 38.5% from three last year for Tamar Bates. He's also a Kansas City native, knows his team well. He was also almost 94% from the free throw line. That's a beautiful number. We like people who convert from the free throw line. Big props to them. And also a consistent shooter who almost was 50% from the floor last season. Tamar Bates is an excellent player to get back for Missouri this season, and one that's really exciting for the Tigers.
Yeah, we got to see him play in Kansas City last year. He is going to be a very important piece for this team. Um, much in the way of being a leader because we mentioned they do have a very young team coming in. And I think if he can play consistent and turn it on, he is going to be a huge asset for Coach Gates. Yeah, let's talk about Jacob Cruz. 19.1 points per game, 8.2 boards, 48.5% from the field with UT Martin. Seems like a guy who is going to be able to get in there and get it done. Another guy who's going to be able to kind of step in as a leader on this team, but somebody who I think is going to have to adjust his game a little bit coming into Mizzou from UT Martin. I think it's going to be a little bit of a step up. And my question is, do we see, him struggle in that transition, or do we see something like Dalton Connect last year from Tennessee, who went from one level and just absolutely skyrocketed when he made the move?
And that's going to be the question, right? Is can they make the jump? That's always the question when you got a mid-major player moving up. And also, speaking of can you make the jump, how about from the high school ranks to college basketball? This is the first time we're mentioning a freshman actually in our players to know, and that's Noor Boateng, one of the best players in college basketball for this upcoming class. He's in the top 50. He's one of the top 15 freshman coming to the SEC this year. Plays out there on the wing. He's a 4-star freshman, nationally ranked 26th, number 8 small forward in this class, and the number 1 player out of the state of the Arkansas. Was a big grab for Missouri this offseason. He's physically strong. He's got a good body, high energy, high motor, and just an excellent athlete overall. And he competes just up and down on both ends of the court. His best side of the court right now is on defense, and he is improving his offensive game. So something to look forward to there. Noor Boateng looks like he might be a lottery pick as well. And so he's an exciting player for this Missouri team coming into this next season. A lot of excitement around Noor Boateng. But let's take a look at the rest of the roster. Maddy, kind of what are your thoughts when you're looking at the backcourt and the front court?
I mean, I think we have, a solid roster here. You've got a lot of talent in both portions of the field. You got a lot of returning talent, but then again, like you mentioned, we've got a Noor Boating who is going to be a phenomenal freshman as long as he makes the jump well. In that backcourt, you've got a lot of leadership, a lot of experience, which can be a very good sign for the Tigers.
Something I want to also mention is that you've got 3 7-footers on this team for Missouri. You got Josh Gray, you got Trent Barnes at 7'5", and you got Peyton Marshall. A lot of attention being paid to the fact that Missouri has not been a good rebounding team and has needed some help in that front court for sure. Bringing in 2 guys who are in the major at that center position in the recruiting ranks, and also one who's got a little bit of this conference experience out of South Carolina, and Josh Gray. Maybe a more of a transitional guy who can give you a couple minutes here and there to help out and provide some leadership for these younger players. You also got guys like Marcus Allen, who's coming in, Trent Burns, who I just mentioned, coming into this group. Some really good players there. Mark Mitchell out of Duke, 11.6 points per game, another excellent player. And then Marquise Warwick is also another player to keep an eye out for. And then also you're talking about that backcourt, Tony Perkins. Tony Perkins is interesting, and I expect some big things out of Tony Perkins coming from Iowa this season. 14 points a game, 4.4 rebounds, and almost getting up there close to 5 assists a game for Tony Perkins. So exciting player. Let's go ahead and jump to the indexes. If you haven't been keeping up with the other previews, here's what's going on. We're looking at two methods to evaluate the roster and the expectations for Missouri and get a feel for where trends and numbers say what we should be thinking about when it comes to Missouri. The roster items are based on Evan Mia's research that took place this offseason. There are three key items. First, we're looking at talent. Missouri has talent. The Tigers brought in the number 5 recruiting class this offseason, and a year ago, they brought in a top 30 class. They also brought in the number 13 transfer class out of the portal this offseason. Second, we're looking at retention, and you want to hopefully retain 50% of the playing time you had from last season. Missouri did a decent job here. The Tigers retained 85.3 minutes between 5 players. They lost some key minutes to graduation from guys like Nick Honor, Sean East, and Noah Carter. So some of the guys who stayed will help you hope take that next step and will fill some bigger roles. And then some of the transfers, you got to hope that they gel. But Missouri did well and better than others in the SEC when it comes to that playing time retention. And then finally, you're looking at players who have played 1 or more years of college basketball for your team. You got 5 guys coming back to play for Missouri. Guys like Tamar Bates, Caleb Grill are important retentions for the Tigers. Adds to the experience and the chemistry of this team. Good roster. Has a lot of things you're looking for. This feels like a 2.25, 2.5 out of 3 at boxes checked here on the roster. So just how high is the ceiling? Well, we got to go to the factors that a lot of Vegas folks look at to use to try to figure out who their champion is when they put the odds together in March. Now, there's more to add here, but this is what you start with to kind of get a feel for now, because this is what can start being measured this time of year and what we can kind of get an understanding for. First, you want 2 of your top 3 scorers to be upperclassmen. Missouri has the box checked and has a decent probability of that happening. If stats hold from last year, we're looking at Marquise Warwick, Jacob Cruz, and Tony Perkins being your top scorers. All upperclassmen. Stands to reason that 2 of these guys will be there with over 19 points a game as their average from last season. It just makes sense. Might go down a little bit deeper on the roster, but you've got upperclassmen scorers as your leaders more than likely. Second, you're looking for a team that shoots well. You're looking for 36% or better from 3. Believe it or not, Missouri's a little shaky here. From the players who have played a year of college basketball, you got a team percentage of 32.8% from 3 last season on this roster. It could be better, but I think it's on the players with experience because Missouri didn't bring a ton of big-time shooters in from their freshman class. They got guys who aren't bad shooters like a Noah Boateng, but not a ton of elite guys who will see significant minutes out there hitting all sorts of three-point shots. So your experienced guys and your transfers really got to boost this number up to raise that ceiling for Missouri. And then finally, you're looking for a top 40 defense in KenPom. I don't know if Missouri's going to be there. They were 181st last season in KenPom. I definitely think they'll be better defensively this year. The front court got a lot more talent, for instance. Also, Jacob Cruz had the 5th best defensive rating on UT Martin last year in players who played 20 or more games. Maybe he helps. Mark Mitchell was 4th on Duke, and Josh Gray was 2nd on South Carolina. Noah Boateng is also a good defender. You're bringing in from your freshman class. We might find some improvement here. But it's worth noting that Missouri was 180th in 2023, and Cleveland State was 227th, 138th, and 250th while Gates was there. Gates has never been a top-level defense coach. He's only had one team as a head coach that was above the 40th percentile in KenPom in his time as a head coach. Not top 40, top 40% in D1 college basketball. So around 144th-ish or better. So how much better? We'll see. He's more of an outscore you kind of coach. And I think this is going to be the limiting factor on Missouri. I think Missouri can be a good team and have expectations, but a lot of it's going to depend on the experienced players and how much the freshmen can rise to the level, how much you can shoot, and especially how much better you can play defense. I think that's going to be the biggest limiting factor for Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at these analytics all days, but they're not going to mean anything until we play some basketball. So let's turn to the schedule. Missouri will open the season up at Memphis in the FedEx Forum.
I know you're just so excited about that, Maddie, because you're a big fan of Memphis basketball. But there has been some just weird stuff going on in Memphis basketball this offseason, a lot of behind the scenes things that are kind of just been noteworthy around nationally when it comes to college basketball. They're just returning one player. In Nick Jordan, 7 points a game and 4 rebounds. He played 25 games for Missouri, or not Missouri, but for Memphis last season. 10 players in the Tigers rotation from last year left the program. So this is going to be a whole new look for Memphis. And they've got some guys here. Tyrese Hunter's coming in, Colby Rogers from Wichita State. They've also got a few other players like PJ Carter, who had 10 points a game at UTSA last season. So they're trying to fill those minutes up the best that they can. I don't know what to expect fully from Memphis for next season. They are predicted, at least from Hoop Scoop Media, to be the number one team in the AAC. AAC is not that deep of a conference. So how good is that number one team going to be? Well, we'll find out. So Memphis is one of those teams that feel a little bit shakier to me this season.
Yeah, maybe a game that, who knows? We might see the rise of Missouri come from this game, but it's going to depend on how they follow that game up.
Yeah.
After Memphis, Missouri is back home. They'll face Howard, Eastern Washington, Mississippi Valley, Pacific, UAPB, and then Lindenwood. Then we go to the ACC SEC Challenge, where Mizzou will face Cal at home.
Cal stinks. I'm just going to start it out there. Mark Madsen's trying to do his best out there, and he's trying to put this team together. They're playing in the ACC this year. They're projected somewhere around the bottom of the ACC. If Missouri doesn't win this game, it's going to be a problem because this is a game that you're supposed to win. Honestly, they've got 9 players who left the program this offseason. They've got a bit of a mess going on there. It's really just it's a long-term rebuild out there in Berkeley, and Missouri is supposed to be Cal. Facts. And it's really not even going to be that big of a resume booster. So I'm not going to hype up Cal. It's just a game that honestly, Missouri should win. Missouri should win that game.
Which they may need that game and the slew of easier games considering their next challenge. After Cal, Mizzou will, like I said, have a huge challenge in front of them against their rival, Kansas.
Yeah, so this is the best game on the schedule, and it's a tough one. Hunter Dickinson's back. They've also got Adams back. They've also got some other guys back. Kansas just looks really, really good. They're preseason number 1 in the CBS top 25 and 1 this season. They also brought in the number 3 transfer class in the country this offseason. Kansas is ready to play basketball, and they're going to be somewhere in almost every poll, somewhere in the top 10. Anybody who's got them outside the top 10 coming in is got a grudge against Kansas or just doesn't trust Kansas after last season, which is silly because Bill Self is one of the best basketball coaches in the country. If not, he is probably the best right now. So overall, tough game, tough ask. Any best resume chance of the whole thing, quad 1A. I don't care where you play this game, but it does matter where you play this game because this game's in Columbia. Can there be an upset brewing? That's going to be the question. Can Missouri get that upset? And that's what we're going to ask the entire time when it comes to this opportunity. The students are going to be ready for this one. The fans are going to be ready for this one. How's that environment going to be? You're going to obviously try to build up some momentum because there shouldn't necessarily be a loss. If there's going to be a loss, it's going to be against Memphis early in the season. So you've got a really, really good chance here for a hyped up Missouri team to maybe upset Kansas. We'll see. That's going to be a tough matchup and a tough ask.
Definitely. Moving on, Missouri will then have LIU in Jacksonville State. Then they're off to St. Louis, where they will face their other rival in Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois is another team that's going to be a whole new look this year. Brad Underwood has turned Illinois into a very good team in the Big Ten. This year, he's probably looking to be somewhere in maybe the top 7, top 8, somewhere in there. Hoop Scoops has got them 5th right now for how they've got them put together, but they've lost a lot of guys. Like Terrence Shannon's gone. You've also got, Coleman Hawkins, who's also gone from this team. So they really had to hit the portal and find some guys who are going to help them out. Kylan Boswell is a player that they brought in from Arizona. They also brought in Kerry Booth, Jake Davis. They've got a few players that have come into this team to kind of help it out. But, again, this is like when we were talking about Ohio State, when so many of the other previous, we don't exactly know what to expect out of Illinois. I imagine they'll be a tournament team, but just I don't know how good of a tournament team Illinois is necessarily going to be. I think it's beneficial to play this game not in Missouri because there is a chance that maybe things don't go great. Or not in Missouri. I mean, not at Columbia. And the fact you're playing this in St. Louis, so we'll see how the net opportunity comes out of this one because there's an opportunity that things don't necessarily go great for Illinois this season.
Yep. So after the Illinois game, they will finally finish the non-conference play with Alabama State. After looking at the rundown of these teams, David, what are your thoughts here on this non-conference schedule?
I want to put my words together, right? And I want to make sure I say this correctly. This is a very, very weak non-conference. I know you got Kansas on there. I know you got Illinois, Memphis on there. But this schedule is overall very, very weak. And it's might be one of the weakest that we've seen so far put together that we've discussed here in the preview. 6 teams in this are we're outside the top 300 in Ken Palm last season. This is what we're dealing with. That's not a lot of great opportunities on your resume. And then that also creates this really bad situation to where if you lose a game, that could seriously hurt you. I don't know who wants to talk about last season, but Jackson State last season really hurt Missouri's resume and put a really bad stain on it earlier in the season to where it was going to be hard to get off the mat to begin with. We also saw it happen to Vanderbilt last year with Presbyterian. So a lot of do not lose this game type of games in here. You cannot do it. You cannot go to sleep against some of these games. There's also no major road games outside the Memphis game. That's it. With Kansas at home, you got a serious chance here that you may end up with this schedule with only 1 or 0 losses. That's a real possibility for Missouri. So they're going to look really, really good if things go exactly right for this non-conference schedule. So it'll be looking really, really good. As far as by my count, you're maybe looking at quad 1 opportunities in here. Kansas, maybe Illinois with it being a neutral site game. We're going to have to see how it goes. Memphis, possibly, but they also might be a quad 2 game. And then your quad 3 games, you're looking at Eastern Washington and Cal. And then you have 8 total quad 4 games if things kind of shake out the way that they look like they're going to shake out here. That's not a lot to build your resume off of. You're going to have to get the work done in conference play. Some of it's not their fault. Like the ACC, SEC schedule is something that's out of Missouri's control. But this reminds me a lot of Ole Miss last season, where they were really, really good coming out of non-conference. And you remember we did that segment last year, Maddie, where we talked about Ole Miss and it was like, oh yeah, they look really good. They made the top 25. Look how good Ole Miss was. And then it turned out not to be the case. So like there's some definite fear here and what this can turn into. So you got to make sure you just win every one of these dang games that you can and try to take advantage of the Kansas Illinois games. Like those could be really big. Take advantage of that Memphis game. See how it turns out for you guys. Again, I just don't like this way of scheduling. I think it builds confidence when you're winning those games. I think it does a lot of good things, but there's a lot of risk involved as well. And it's very against the trend that we see for scheduling now. I will say Missouri's done this, and they did it that 2022-2023 season and came out just fine. So maybe it works. Maybe it works for Dennis Gates. It also could be look at the number of wins kind of situation for Missouri as well. But Maddie, what are your kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm thinking after last season, it's more of one of those look at all of our wins kind of situations. They're trying to come back after last year after not having a strong record. And I think that's part of it is just trying to build up that record as much as possible before they hit conference play. I very well could be wrong. They may go out there and just dominate every team. But I think we look at the schedule and we're not going to know who this Missouri team is until we see those games like Kansas and Illinois.
Yeah, and we may not even know exactly who that team is because even in 2023, I don't think the Kansas game went exactly great for Missouri, if memory serves me right. And then they did well in SEC play. So we may not get a feel for who this team actually is until January, like for real. Like we may have just question marks around it like crazy. And then, once we're in SEC play, when we see it more consistently upturn the level of competition, I think that's when we're going to understand who Missouri is for this next season. Let's turn to the SEC schedule. Missouri has LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama, South Carolina, and Kentucky at home. Away, they've got Auburn, Florida, Texas, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Georgia. And then their home and home series are Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt. Maddie, what are your thoughts on the conference schedule?
My thoughts on the conference schedule are that Mizzou needs to win a lot of those non-conference games.
Well,
I
they have
think
to do
you've
that
got
regardless.
I think you've got some tough games at home. You're looking at Texas A&M is going to be a good team. Alabama's going to be a good team, and they play Kentucky later on in the in conference play. So I think they're going to kind of have it together. And then I'm still kind of putting question marks around South Carolina, as well as Ole Miss. So I think you've got one for sure, and then two that could be maybe wins. Looking at the away schedule, you've got a lot of hard games. You've got to go to Auburn, Florida, Texas. Mississippi State's going to be a decent team. Tennessee, and then Georgia's was my number one under the radar team. So being over there in the Steg, it's going to be a hard game as well. And then you got your home and home in the forced rivalry with Arkansas. You've got the new kid on the block in Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, which I think they can win. Probably both of those when you're talking about Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. So I think they're going to do okay in conference play, but nothing amazing in my personal opinion.
It's not the easiest schedule. I agree. The SEC schedule is not the easiest thing that there is. I do think that they can definitely, at minimum, take three against between Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, and then also getting Arkansas fairly early in the season, if I recall correctly, here on their schedule. Yeah, their first game against Arkansas is on January 18th at home. So that does provide an opportunity with a team that maybe hasn't gelled yet for Arkansas. So maybe you take one there as well. LSU, I think you got some confidence there. South Carolina, I think is a team that Mizzou can beat at home. And then there's some other opportunities on the road as well. Georgia's going to be tough, but I think they can pull that one out and get a quality win out of that. Mississippi State as well is a good opportunity. Obviously, their road games are tough. Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn are all going to be really, really tough out of that 6 games there on the away schedule. But you got some home opportunities as well. Like I said, Kentucky's coming in. Alabama's coming in. Texas A&M's coming in. Ole Miss is going to be a decent team. So we'll see. I think you got some good chances at home. So if you're feeling good and you got a good atmosphere there at Mizzou Arena, I think you got a chance to get some wins out of this conference schedule. It may not be the best standing place you ever get, but you might get some really good resume points out of it. And I think that is a distinct possibility. All right, Maddie, let's go to the expectations. Maddie, what are your thoughts on Missouri?
I'm waiting for the Mizzou fans to get the Rotten Tomatoes for me. But I'll be honest, I have very low expectations for this Missouri team. Last year just set the bar so very low. And I think their excellent recruiting class gives them a boost, but as always, I'm not putting all of my stock in a freshman class. We see the stats that teams are successful in the postseason with more experience. I'm going to put Missouri at 12, and I think the number for them is going to be 17 and a half, and I'm taking the over or the under at 17.
Ugh.
But, I'm welcoming any pleasant surprises.
That's okay. So let's just go through this here real fast because again, this is a team that we have different opinions on. And you're saying I don't put stock in this freshman class. Granted, there's a lot of freshmen here, and I get that. Nor Boating, Peyton Marshall, Marcus Allen, Trent Burns, T.O. Barrett. I totally understand that not wanting to put a bunch of stock in freshmen. Man, I understand that entirely. Don't forget there are some talented freshmen out there, and just because maybe you don't want to depend on them in March doesn't mean that they aren't going to contribute to wins. And I think that Nor Boating and Peyton Marshall can be guys who can do that for you, especially in the front court situation, because that is where Mizzou needed to improve the most. But you talked about experience. We talked about it this offseason. Out of the transfer portal, they got Jacob Cruz. They got Tony Perkins, Marquise Warwick, all graduates. Mark Mitchell's a junior now. He's an upperclassman. And then Josh Gray comes from a South Carolina team that showed everyone how to shock the entire country last year. They got some guys. This was the number 13 portal class coming in, and they're all upperclassmen. So you got experienced players there, and then the returners like talking about Tamar Bates and Caleb Grill, like Aiden Shaw, all upperclassmen as well. Out of those 5 returners that Mizzou's got, five's actually a pretty darn good number compared to the rest of the conference. So there's experience, there's chemistry, and then there's talent. So I'm not I'm not just gonna sleep on this. Like I disagree with you. So I have pulled back since the decision day, but it's really has more to do with the rest of the conferences and not anything really to do with Mizzou. So like I think Missouri is going to be just fine. I've got them ninth, which is in that group of teams that are 7 through 10 who feel like tournament teams but are hard to pick apart for different reasons. I've got Missouri, Texas, Texas A&M in that group so far. That's been revealed to this point in these episodes. Again, I'm really picking off confidence, and this is where I think that where then more than where I think they'll actually end up. So I certainly feel like Missouri could finish even higher than that. I've got them 20-11. I'm guessing the number should be somewhere around 20 and a half. I've got them steamrolling through that non-conference schedule. I think they'll at least take one between Memphis, Illinois, and Kansas. That's where I'm getting the half from. There is that going to be 2 out of 3, or is that going to be 1 out of 3? I think I'm going to go about 10-8 or 99 in conference, which is where the logjam was about last year, 7 through 9 in the conference. And then I'm going to add 2 more teams to that mix, and that's where I'm getting Missouri, and all those teams feel like they should have an opportunity to be somewhere like 7 through 10 seeds in the NCAA tournament. I think it's a possibility. I think that's where it's at, because like this was my number 1 under the radar team, unlike Maddy, and I feel like Missouri is getting a little bit disrespected. I personally feel that. And it's because they got talent, they got experienced players, they got guys who can play hoops. So I'm going to go with this, and I'm going to hold firm that Missouri will be in the NCAA tournament this season. They may not have the greatest seed ever because they got a heck of a road to go through the SEC tournament, but they got the opportunity to get some wins, and I think they'll be there. So come March. So that's where I've got them at. We're going to disagree. Maddy, any counterpoints that you want to add in there, since we just so firmly disagree on this team?
I mean, I think you're looking at a very optimistic future, and I'm still stuck in the past a little bit. So I think that's where the disagreement's kind of settling. Um, I may change my tune when we get through half of the non-conference schedule if they're, playing well against some of those better teams, like you mentioned, or even at the beginning of the conference schedule if they're doing a lot better. So it's going to be one, like I said in our kind of season preview that we did earlier on. They're going to have to prove it to me that they're worth me moving up my ladder.
Again, I just see the talent, and I see the experience, and I see good players that they brought into this team. This was a heck of a job to build this team. You want to talk about the past and how you're kind of stuck in the past. We were talking about last season. What about the season before that, where they ended up in the top half of the SEC? Like, I again, there's 2 different situations here, and I think the question is how good of a coach do you think Dennis Gates is? And I think he did a really good job in that first year. I don't think he's the best of the best in the very, legends of the game quality. He's not the best defensive coach, but I think he's a good coach. And I think he's a guy who recruits well. He's got a decent modernized game plan, and I think that they can find some success this season. So, like I said, you want to get stuck in the past. I'm thinking about what 2 years ago looked like. And last 2 years ago was really darn good. And now you get the best team that he's had here this entire time. So I'm going to say he does something with it. And I'm going to say that he makes the tournament and ends up in a respectable place in the conference.
I hope you're right, David, for the sake of the underdog story, but that defensive part is really what gets me. So I guess we'll see what kind of defenders we'll have on this Tiger team.
We'll see who's going to be in the intro video next year. All right. So see who ends up in the intro next season. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. If you guys have not already, please like and subscribe to the Hoops Southbound Show. Love having you guys here talking hoops with us. How do you think Missouri is going to do? I'm sure the comment section will reflect the conversation that me and Maddy are having right now on a regular basis with Missouri, and it's been going on since decision day. So go ahead, drop those comments in there. Please please subscribe to the Hoops Up on Show. We appreciate having you guys here. And until next time, see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.